Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to The Common Law. I'm your host, Attorney Ed Berkman. Here at The Common Law, we like to talk about everyday legal issues and just give everybody a basic understanding of pressing legal matters. Now, although I am an attorney, I am not your attorney. If you have a legal issue or a question, please feel free to contact me. My email is on the screen below. Please do not take anything, either myself or my guest, who is also an attorney. Don't take anything that we say as legal advice. Like I said, we're both attorneys, but we're not your attorneys, and we just want to make it very clear that whatever your issue is, if we're talking about an issue that seems very similar, please trust me, the devil is in the details when it comes to this stuff. So I assure you, it is different in some way, and you need to have a one-on-one conversation with an attorney. With that out of the way, I'd like to introduce my guest. He's a colleague and a friend. His name is Nick Vonsalidis. Nick, thank you for joining The Common Law.
Thanks for having me, Ed. Good to be here.
Oh, great. Now, Nick, you have been practicing for how long now?
A little over 40 years.
Wow.
Exactly.
And
hard to believe.
And your main focus throughout the whole 40 years, has that always been geared towards estate planning?
So I would say the first 15 to 20 years, I did a little bit of everything. I did some family law, I did estate planning, estate administration, criminal defense, a little bit of everything. And for about the last 20 plus years, I focused primarily on estate planning, elder law being a component of estate planning, and estate administration, which is a fancy way of saying passing on assets from or property from someone who's passed away to their beneficiaries. So it's been my primary focus for quite a while now.
And where did you go to law school, Nick?
I went to law school at Western New England, now known University. It was Western New England College in Springfield, Massachusetts. And I graduated from there in 1983.
Are you always from the North Shore, or did you?
I'm a Lynn guy.
Okay.
I'm a Lynn guy, so I'm a North Shore guy. Lived Lynn, Salem, Peabody, a little bit up this way. Primarily lived in Arizona for a couple of years, but primarily a Massachusetts guy, Eastern Massachusetts.
So I, as well, an attorney focusing on real estate and estate planning, estate administration. That's probably what we'll talk about today. What are some of the big concerns you're seeing your clients deal with right now in terms of estate planning?
I think there's a few different things. I think one of the sad things to see is sometimes a person or a family waits a little bit too long to consult with an estate planning attorney. And by too long, I mean when sometimes the mental health issues have come into play, and there oftentimes is a warning that may be happening. And understandably, people are reluctant to present that, but sometimes if people wait too long, then they really don't have the legal ability to do an estate plan because they have to have the competence necessary to make difficult decisions.
And I think the big piece of that is the plan, right? So it's the planning, it's knowing to do it ahead of time and making sure all your ducks are in a row for just in case. Like, no one knows what tomorrow brings. So I'm with you in terms of, making sure clients don't wait too long, people don't wait too long before they go ahead and get an estate plan, because you might not have that mental capacity.
Right.
You might even be incapacitated, and then you don't have loved ones that can come see you if you don't have the power of attorney or a healthcare proxy or even a HIPAA release, like those documents that are very commonly used in estate planning, estate plans and estate plan.
Right, exactly. And if it is to the point where someone's beyond competence, and oftentimes that's questionable because it's not a black or white issue, but sometimes if it is, it's necessary for the family to get court orders out of the probate court to either make healthcare decisions or to make financial decisions. And while that's important to get done, it's much easier to do it when the client himself or herself can make those decisions on their own.
It's also a lot less expensive.
Yeah, for sure.
Like
absolutely.
Conservatorships. Folks, conservatorships, that's when you go ahead and you need someone to appoint a conservator. It actually has to be done by a judge. You have to go to court. You have to pay lawyers hourly fees on that. It's very expensive. So it is really important to just get the planning piece of it done just so you don't have to worry about any sort of competency issues. And I think that with everybody living longer, it's more and more common that we're having people, and it's a sad situation, right? That, someone is, losing their mental fortitude. So
Right.
it's tough. It's hard on the family. It's hard for the individual, and
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
What you say about people living longer, because people are living longer, and a lot of times they're living longer with these type of issues, and to have something in place for if that were to happen is important. People focus on, well, what happens when I die? Where's the property going to go? And that's an important issue, but legally, there's a period in between oftentimes where things have to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are your clients, do you find them to be past retirement age, or do you have often any younger clients? Like, what's a
Right.
good age for somebody thinking about getting an estate plan?
Yeah, it varies. While more of my clients are older than younger, I do have some clients, especially younger married clients who have young children, who give thought to, God forbid, something happens to mom and dad, what happens to the children, or who the children going to live with, and financially are they going to be taken care of. So there's some planning that goes on. I'd say it's a minority of families with young children, but it's out there somewhat often. Have something in place really to protect the children, to have a plan in place for the children, because sometimes, as we've probably heard, families can disagree after the fact about how to handle certain situations, so you want to have something clearly laid out. On the other end, I find as people approach retirement, I see clients who may come in their 50s or 60s, and maybe they did a will 20 to 30 years ago for the reason I just talked about for young children, and they really want to revisit everything, and they've seen issues come up with their parents who either are elderly or had illness and passed on, and they try and avoid some of the pitfalls, whether it's getting involved in a probate court administration when somebody dies, or some nursing home issues and having to expend a lot of money on nursing home care potentially. So oftentimes they see the generation after them, their parents' generation, some of the issues they have felt, that actually brings them into the office to try and address those issues ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. So if someone's older or younger, they're going to need different things,
Right.
there's all kinds of different trusts and plans that we can, draft for them. I mean, we try to make it very unique to the person.
Right.
So, and it's also, everybody doesn't have to have just one will. You can update those things.
Oh, right.
And then you should. And anybody out there, don't hesitate to ask an attorney to look it over and to, give a review. And I like to think we say, 7 years, every 7 years or so?
Yeah, that's probably good.
Have somebody take a look at it.
Good rule of thumb. Or, our lives change often.
Yeah.
Whether it's marital status or an unexpected death or illnesses or things like that. And when there are change of circumstances in your life, that's a good time to revisit what your plan is. Or if you don't have one, that's a good time to develop one.
So what else do you do with estate planning? Do you do anything in real estate? Like if someone was to ask you, well, I want to put my house in a trust, like, do you just move it into a single trust? Do you have a multiple trust plan? How would you handle that?
The good attorney answer is it depends.
Yeah, right.
So the reason you'd consider putting a house in a trust, well, there's really a couple different reasons. I know a couple primary ones, but a reason you'd put it in a trust at least is to avoid probate, so the house wouldn't have to go through probate court administration. And that's true with mostly all of your assets. If you were to have a trust, whether it's a single trust or a multiple trust plan with your spouse, say, the reason you would not only establish the trust, but you would transfer your assets, including the house, to the trust, is to avoid probate. Other times people will transfer their assets into a Medicaid or an irrevocable trust, and sometimes that's done because people are concerned that if they have experienced a long-term illness and they're no longer able to take care for themselves, and they live for a period of time in a nursing home or other long-term care facility, that they'll go through all or most of their assets. And if they go through all their assets and they own a home, the home would be subject to repaying the government after you pass away, sometimes before that. And people transfer the house into a trust to protect the home, so to speak. That's a term that's used.
Yeah.
It's not the technical term, but it's a term that's used to protect the home for the children in case of long-term care.
And that goes back into the planning piece of estate planning, is that 5-year look-back period,
Right.
to protect that property. So again, getting the ball started, getting the ball rolling earlier
Right.
is the best solution here, because it's much easier to plan it out than it is to go into like crisis planning.
Right, right.
Or I've done it, I'm sure you have too, where you're signing documents in a nursing home or at a hospital.
Right.
Because the person's either dying, they feel like they're about to lose capacity. Maybe there's moments of lucidity.
Right, right.
That, you can still execute some of those documents. They still have, mental fortitude enough to understand what they're doing, but, they're in decline. Right. And then the 5-year look back, you want to protect those assets to shield against, future long-term care costs.
Right, that's right.
Because no one has long-term care insurance anymore.
No, it's
so expensive.
The insurance companies, I think, were losing money on it, so not many are selling it any longer.
Yeah.
I think they sell it as they sell like as a hybrid policy. Oftentimes,
Okay.
I've seen where it's a hybrid life insurance and long-term care, and the death benefit, potential death benefit, can be used to pay for long-term care.
Yeah. And that's usually that maxes out very quickly, though.
Right.
And a lot of times you have to establish residency and all this other stuff, which is it's tough, because if you go into a nursing home and you establish residency there, well, now you're not intending to return home, which could affect your real property.
Right.
That subject to that estate recovery issue.
Right. So the reimbursement from the home, sale of the home, exactly. Yeah.
Or you can even get denied. You can have your application denied.
Right.
If you don't intend to return home, because then it's a countable asset. All of a sudden. You're not living there.
Yeah, I think one of the hard things of doing what we do as estate planning attorneys is a lot of the issues are technical, and a lot of the terms are technical. And, if you're not careful as the attorney, you can speak through a client or speak past a client, and it makes it hard for them to really understand some of the issues involved. So I think it's important for what we do, especially when you're first meeting with a client and meeting with the family, to get to know them, to find out what their concerns are, what their anxieties are, to learn a little bit about their family dynamic, both as spouses, their relationship, and the relationship with the children, and then be able to find out what's important to them. So you can explain some of the legal issues and try and present them in a way that's really more from a layman's perspective of what they are, and see if the clients can prioritize what their concerns are, and then try and address them along the lines of what we're talking about.
That's the very goal of the show, is to take those complex legal issues and break them down.
Right.
In lay terms.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's a skill that most of us develop the longer we practice. We're able to do it. And actually, for me and for many, that's one of the more enjoyable parts of the job, is getting to know people. And we're not always dealing with people who are going through a crisis. Often we are on occasion, but getting to know people and their families and people in the community in which we live, I think that's one of the more rewarding parts of the work.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What else do you like about being a lawyer?
I think I think it's that's the primary thing I like being about an attorney is a couple things is getting to know people. Like I said, that's enjoyable, and connecting with them. And you find out, even in our polarized society, which we all are aware of, when you get in a room with people and you find out, regardless of, you're not necessarily talking politics in those meetings. You very rarely are, and probably you shouldn't be talking politics in those meetings. But inevitably, you're meeting people with cross-section of opinions. But when you cut right down to it and you're meeting with people, you realize that we're all much more similar than we are than different. And so I enjoy that part, and I enjoy something like this in the office. I feel confident in what I'm talking about, and I enjoy educating people about the different issues and talking to them about them. Those are the primary things. Drafting the documents, that can get kind of mundane and routine on a day-to-day basis. But explaining them to the clients at the signing, meeting them at the initial meeting, I think that's the most enjoyable part of the meeting for me.
Now, what's your least favorite part about being in estate planning?
It can be a grind, and it can be a lot of hours because the work is so technical. And you're looking at similar documents on a day in and day out basis. It can be easy to look past something in the document that shouldn't be there, and it's really important that you read and reread the document multiple times before you present it to a client. But that's hard work, especially on a day-to-day basis, where sometimes you're more tired than others. And so I think that's probably the more difficult and challenging part of the job. And keeping up to date with all the changes that's in the law, that's important. That's obviously very important.
Now, how did you settle on estate planning, your practice area? Now, this is what you always wanted to do, or is this sort of something that you just sort of found that you were good at, or found a niche in?
I think it's something I found that I like, and I was fortunate. Because I did different types of legal work as an attorney, as I said, for the first 15 to 20 years, including a fair amount of trial work, which I enjoyed on the day of trial, but leading up to it was a lot of work. What I ended up was working for a firm in Peabody, and one of the partners there was beginning to wind down his practice, and he had built up quite a practice over the years, and he's a very nice man. And I just found it was very comfortable for me to meet with families and talk to them about it. When I was in college, I thought I was going to end up in social work early on.
Oh, really?
That's what I thought I wanted to do, was to work with people, and I do. I would want to work with people and help with people. And I just found this was a different way to do it, in a way that I found more challenging and rewarding.
That's great.
So happy where I am, and
Yeah.
and I'm not slowing down too much yet. So
Good.
I'm enjoying my work.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked about the planning, and it's real important to get to know those families and talk to them, have honest, good conversations like a person, and that's one of the more enjoyable parts of it. But for me, one of the least enjoyable parts about it is when you're communicating with the families going through a loss, and that leads to the estate administration side.
Right.
For me personally, it's always tough. I always try to be a human first and a lawyer second,
Right.
just so we can navigate that probate process, the best that we can. I mean, obviously, the ones without any wills or trusts or any planning are always the harder ones to do, and take much longer to get through.
Right.
At least a year. And at the same time, you're dealing with your client is, the people who are left over, the people who are still here, and it's really tough.
Right.
To, ask them, because it's a lot of work on the client too, on getting, everything in order.
Yeah.
So we can make the proper filings.
Right.
And it's just real tough. That's something I have always sort of
Right.
Tried to be very mindful of, because it's probably, for a lot of people, it's like the hardest time of their life.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It can be overwhelming. It oftentimes is overwhelming for the survivors. Emotionally, certainly, it is oftentimes, and then dealing with all the financial ramifications of what's involved, whether it's having outstanding bills that's in final expenses that need to be paid, whether it's taxes that have to be dealt with. It definitely is a very trying time, and I think that it is important, as what you said, that when you're meeting with the survivors of someone who's passed away, that you sit in on the meeting with a sympathetic ear and learn things about the family member that was who's just passed, because you really have to try and comfort. A lot of times it's emotional comfort, but it's a lot of anxiety because of, whether it's a home has to be sold, or sometimes there are bank accounts that have to be transferred, and unfortunately there are times where families are estranged, and that really makes the legal process difficult because sometimes the children don't get along well, and it's a tough part of the practice. It's also challenging because some of the issues that go along with estate administration, which is basically the transfer of assets to beneficiaries, but there's a lot involved in that. There can be a lot of complications depending upon the type of assets involved.
Yeah, especially it's with, everything's different, right? Every single one of those is different because
it is.
People and families are different.
Right.
So it's, what could need a lot of attention. Right. It could be a very complicated probate process, and then it could be very streamlined. It could be they have everything organized. Right. Kind of goes either way. Yeah. So like the work is vastly different, but then the personalities and sort of the grief that people are dealing with, it's a whole other component to it. So
and it's a lot.
I like that sympathetic ear line. I think that's exactly what we need to do.
And it can be a lot of work for the person who may initially be flattered that they were chosen to administer the estate, so to speak. Yeah. But it's a lot of work. They are entitled to be compensated for it, but my experience is when all is said and done, and that it's usually at least a year period of administration. Yeah. When that is finally done, there's a lot of relief.
I've had clients come to me, after someone has passed, and they're like, usually someone's offended that they weren't made trustee or successor trustee or personal representative, and I'm like, I have to say hey, they did you a favor, right? Like it's a job. Yeah. Like you're working for that trust or that estate, and carrying out somebody's wishes who aren't here, like it's a big responsibility, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And it could be anywhere from a lot of times people like to, when they do the planning, like usually it's like the oldest is the one who ends up being like the personal representative or successor trustee, and sometimes it's not, and there might be a reason for it. Maybe he's got kids, maybe she's working a really busy job, and they don't want to people want to burden them with something like that. So I always want to tell them it's a hard work for you. They did you a favor, trust me.
Well, it's like when we sit down with clients and they're making decisions on who's going to be their healthcare agent, or who's going to be the executor or personal representative, will a trustee, and sometimes clients get concerned that one of the children is going to be offended that they weren't selected. Exactly. I usually will tell them when all is said and done, they'll be thankful that they didn't have all that responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. And I always lean more towards just having the joint on those roles. I feel like is very challenging. Yeah. Just at a management standpoint.
I don't recommend setting up joint agencies or joint, because there is the potential they could have a disagreement about how to handle things, and if there's a disagreement, sometimes the court has to get involved.
There's
and
two
that really
people, and there's no tiebreaker, and it's
they may get along today, but maybe not in 10 years.
Exactly. Exactly. Alrighty. Now, you said a couple years that you got a little longer to go here in your practice. Is there anything you haven't accomplished as a lawyer that you're looking to do before you retire?
I guess I wouldn't say this in terms of accomplishments. I think I've accomplished what I want. What I find is that when I look back now, in some ways, I'm seeing some of my clients now pass on that I did work for a couple decades ago or longer, and I look back on the names of the people I've worked for all these years. It's rewarding and that I've gotten to meet a lot of different people and have made a lot of different relationships, some of which I've forgot about till I look at, circumstances that either come up or client lists. And I'd say that's been one of the most rewarding things for me, is just, as I said maybe earlier, is just to get to know so many different people. It's been rewarding.
Any courtrooms you wanted to argue a case in before you go?
I've had my fair share of court trials and court arguments, and occasionally I testify in court as a witness if a plan I've prepared is challenged for whatever reason, family members disagree with how things were, estates may be distributed. So occasionally I've had to testify in court, which I'm happy to do because I think it's my duty to the clients that I work for. But I've seen enough of the courtrooms.
Yeah. How is it being a witness as opposed to being an attorney in the courtroom?
I think it depends on the case.
Okay.
I testified in a case 2 or 3 months ago, and it was, I felt comfortable because I knew the material and I knew the circumstances very well. And one of the family members, after I testified, and I didn't think I necessarily testified in her favor so much, she really came up to me and thanked me and said how much her parents liked me. And so that was a good experience.
Yeah. I mean, as a witness, all you have to do is be honest. You just got to sit up there and tell the truth. So
Right.
if it is what it is, you can't get mad at the truth.
Exactly.
So.
And you don't always know all the answers. So if you don't know the answers, that's what you say.
That's
I
I
don't
think
recall,
the biggest
I'm not
thing.
sure.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm
That's
sorry,
okay.
Nick. But the biggest thing I always feel like is, as an attorney, no attorney has all the laws memorized. Like, there's
That's
too
for sure.
many. There's too many, right?
That's for sure.
So a big part of the job is doing the research, and
Right.
that's a lot of what the work is researching and finding those answers to those specific questions. That's why, folks, we say don't take anything that we say as legal advice, because it needs specific research into each one of those topics. So, we're really just professional, researchers.
Right.
And
It's research, and as you know, it's discussing among your colleagues certain circumstances. So you can know what the law is, but then when you apply to the certain situation that you have, then you have to how's it going to affect this particular situation? And there's back and forth on that. It's not always black and white. Usually isn't.
And most of the time, definitely.
Right.
I come from real estate, and so everyone does that differently.
Right.
Everybody does it differently.
Right.
So there's trying to find an ascertainable standard on some of that stuff. It just doesn't exist.
Right.
So and then it's just your best judgment. So.
Right. So that's why it's good to be surrounded with good colleagues who know their stuff, and so that's why one of the reasons I appreciate having you in the office with me.
Nick, you are a joy to work with.
Thank you.
I consider you a good friend and colleague, and thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Great being here with you, Ed.
Thank you. All right. Well, should wrap it up for us this evening. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. If you have a question for Nick, I'll put his information down at the bottom of the screen now. Reach out to him, ask him a question. He's just a really great guy. As you can see, he's super personable, and we work together just about every day. So if you have a question you want to just ask it to me, I can certainly pass it along to Nick as well. So that'll do it for this episode of The Common Law. I look forward to seeing you all next time as we discuss a different legal issue. Have a good night.